Hi guys, I'll pop this video on the front of the video I'm going to do at the end of turn one, but I thought I might just give you an example of why this game is really on the bonkers side. So I played a couple of hours on the game last night. I'll give you a quick snapshot on the map. Something might look quite familiar to you. After 2 hours play, one counter, which is that ship counter there, had moved one box to the left. 2 hours play, and I managed to move one counter. Really quite bad. Actually, it was quite good fun. Perhaps only a masochist can say it was quite good fun, but fair amount happened. So we are about, there are 44 steps, I just counted them, in one op stage of the turn, and there are 3 op stages in the turn. Not everything repeats every time, so there must be close to 100 odd steps to complete one game turn. So we've done about 20 odd steps. So what's happened so far in those first couple of hours that might be in some masochistic way described as fun? Well, I guess the first thing we did was the Italian player started plotting their cargoes for their first reinforcement convoy from Italy. So we've already got 2 at sea, so we were plotting one for one in 3 turns time, and we sent a reinforcement convoy I think to Benghazi and Tripoli, and we've plotted that and its cargo. And at the present, as we haven't launched the offensive, I didn't think it was appropriate for the Italians to start pulling on replacement equipment or troops. They can't bring many on this early in the game, but we really have just gone for ammunition and equipment. So that's all been plotted, and that's sorted. Then what we had to do was move the convoys. So the first convoy due to arrive, which I planned in the planning stage, set sail and is en route to North Africa. At the same time, we plotted strategic and tactical allocation of our air assets. So the Commonwealth player decided to put 3 squadrons into its strategic phase. One of those was a squadron of flying boats, Sunderlands from Alexandria, and then across over in the far distance there in the island of Malta, they put a squadron of gladiators to fly combat air patrol, and a squadron of swordfish queued up, ready to fly if they were radioed in to say any convoys had been spotted. So that was our combat allocation, and for our tactical allocation we put some fighter squadrons into the tactical allocation bucket. For the Italians, we allocated a bunch of our bomber squadrons and our fighter squadrons near the front line in the Tobruk Bardia area onto tactical missions. We couldn't put any squadrons onto flying convoy protection because at present we have no air force allocated in the mainland of Italy or Sicily indeed. So all our air force here is with the Regia Aeronautica in North Africa. So anyway, then we executed the strategic recon segment from our flying boats. So they were flying at, we flew them in 3 groups of 3 to the 3 approach routes from Italy. One flew on the Italy to Tobruk route, one flew on the Sicily to Benghazi route, and another one on the Sicily to Tripoli route. The last one being really at the limit of their reconnaissance range. So none of the Sunderlands had any ammunition because of the extended ranges they were flying. So those 3 reconnaissance units, or wings rather, I guess that would be the right term, flew. The convoy to Tobruk missed or slipped through the net, was not spotted by the recon squadron, and indeed the convoy going to Benghazi also was not identified. But they struck lucky with the 3rd squadron, and the 3rd squadron, right at the limits of its range just as it turned for home, picked up the convoy going towards Tripoli. So signals were sent to Malta and the Gladiator and Swordfish Squadron was dispatched, and they conducted a raid against the spotted convoy. I think 11 swordfish went into the attack. One, unfortunately, was shot down, and we only have, I think, 12 available swordfish in Malta. So one was shot down, one was damaged and had to break off the attack run, and the remaining 9 struck home. They managed to sink one of the ships in the convoy, and 1,000 tons or so of supplies were sent to the bottom. So that was only about 5% of the convoy volume, 10% of the convoy volume. So not massive damage, but it was only one squadron undertaking the attack. So that was quite fun to play through. So the convoy has now successfully landed, and the supply depots in all 3 locations have been torqued up. And then we went on to the first op stage and the tactical aircraft segment. And the Italians launched, I think it was about 7 or 8 squadrons of SM-79, Soviet Machete 79s, the twin-engine bombers, on a raid against Sidi Barrani. So down here, and there's a supply depot at Sidi Barrani. You can see there's a supply depot underneath those other counters, and that was the target of the raid. The Italians decided not to target any of the units on the frontier because they felt that their superiority in terms of mass would be enough to overwhelm those, so they were trying to undermine the Allied position by knocking out those supplies. So many squadrons, because we only had 2 or 3 bombers available, because the Italians had not refitted many of the aircraft before the campaign started. So 20 odd SM-79s were launched, and I realised that the Allies had made a mistake. There is no anti-aircraft battery at Sidi Barrani. We had a couple of unallocated batteries. I think we put 1 on Mersa Matruh, and I think the other one might well be at Buk. So perhaps we should have had them co-located with the ammunition depots. A mistake to learn from in the future. So the raid went through. There was also no combat air patrol over Sidi Barrani. There are only 3 squadrons of fighters available for the Allies, and they were reserved to protect their fleet and their major airfields and supply depots in Alexandria and Cairo. And 1 squadron was flying combat air patrol over Mersa Matruh, which has got a far higher concentration of supply and units and convoys. So I think the right allocation of fighter squadrons was made by the Allies, but it does mean that the Italians, and they did have a CR-32 fighter escort, made it through to Sidi Barrani and executed their attack. No defensive fire, no anti-aircraft fire in place, and although it's only a small supply depot, over 40% of the supplies in that depot were wiped out as a result of that raid. So a really successful raid for the Italians, and nothing to show for it for the Allies in their defensive positions. So that was the air segment completed. A few other bits and pieces were carried out. The counter moved. So one of our coasters, one of the shipping coasters that the Italians control, was loaded up with fuel in Tripoli, and that's started its journey through to Benghazi and possibly onwards to Tobruk. We choose where to land it tactically, so we don't have to give it advanced orders in the case of the coastal shipping. So that one is just on the way from Tripoli, probably going to go to Benghazi, but we'll see whether it comes any further forward. So that's it. That was the end of the first turn, and then we did the first set of aircraft refits. So the RAF is well refitted anyway. Most of the squadrons are active and pretty much had all their aircraft serviceable. They did some more work on their air fleet and topped it up. We've also then moved the fleet in Alexandria. So there's a set of counters, there we go, outside Alexandria port. That represents the British Navy. So they have also left port and are available to go and bombard potentially some of the coastal positions. So we'll see what we do with them later in the game. And then finally, the Italians decided to invest significantly in getting their air force to a higher level of readiness. to support the upcoming ground offensive. So we refitted all of the bomber squadrons in the eastern part of Libya, and all of the fighter squadrons took quite a heavy burden on our supplies and stores. But the Reggio Aeronautica, unlike the land forces, are pretty well equipped in terms of trucks, and they're able to run trucks from their airfields to the local supply depots, and they have sufficient to do that on an ongoing basis. So they had the capacity to do all the refit, and at this point, early in the campaign, the supply depots are well stocked at the moment, having not been drawn down for any land combat. So the Italians now have a very substantial number of their bomber fleet and their fighter squadrons in eastern Libya available. 50 to 60% of most squadrons are now topped off, and that will give them potentially significant air superiority as we move through the next two ops stages in this game. So that was it. That was 2 hours play last night. As I say, one counter, moved 1 hex. But as you can hear, a reasonable amount went on in terms of air activity. And we'll move on and get stuck in to the rest of this first turn. I'll give you a quick snapshot of how turn 1 has gone for the Italians when we complete it. Cheers. Okay, so some things have happened. We're now 2/3 of the way through the first game turn. It's split into 3 operational stages, so you get 3 lots of movement and attacking. Each unit has its own capability point allowance, and that from that allowance you can do various different things. You can attach and detach units, you can take on ammunition, you can move, and you can take or suffer enemy combat. All of those use up some of your capability, and you can also push your units harder than their allowance as well, which increases their level of disorganisation and reduces their combat effectiveness in the longer term. But you can push them to go that extra mile if you think it's appropriate. So as you can see, the Italians were all lined up here on the border at the end of or at the start of the game, and they've pushed through Halifa Pass, and we've thrown 2 of the regular infantry divisions, the 62nd and 63rd infantry divisions, and the 1st Black Shirt militia division have gone through the pass. They drove the Scots Guards that were guarding the pass back and have just driven them out of Book. In addition, the 64th regular infantry division, so these are slightly better troops than the Libyan militia, are moving up to become hopefully the heart of the attack as we try and drive towards Sidi Berani and on towards Mersa Matruh. Over here on the flank, we've got the 3 Libyan divisions, the 1st, the 2nd and the Maletti, which is the 3rd Libyan militia divisions, are continuing the advance on the escarpment. So what else has happened? Well, the 63rd Sarine, the Italian light tanks attached to that division, and a bunch of the other divisions have suffered various degrees of breakdown rate, but the 63rd particularly devastating. They lost over half their light tanks in their first road manoeuvre. They clearly hadn't been maintaining them properly. We've seen a whole bunch of aerial combat. We saw a raid on Book by a large number, 20 to 30 SM-79s, gladiators from the Allied positions. Sorry, no, the air raid was on Mersa Matruh, and gladiators flying combat air patrol from Alexandria intercepted those, but they did manage to knock one of them down. But the defensive anti-aircraft fire was pretty ineffective. The rest of the bombers broke through the Gladiator fighter screen and bombed Mersa Matruh. In the second op stage, when the Italians moved from Halifa Pass up to Book, we saw very extensive Italian air activity. Over 100 SM-79s had been readied at the end of the first op stage, and they attacked Book itself. They attacked Sidi Berani, and they attacked Mersa Matruh. They bombed the port, the airport, the airfield, and the supply depot and trucks in Mersa Matruh, and caused quite heavy damage again to the supply depot and the truck convoys that were in the truck park. at Mersa Matruh, we managed to pin in Buk all of the 2nd Scots Guards and their infantry that were previously defending the pass. But despite that, the 1st CCN and 63rd weren't able to cause particularly heavy casualties, and the British have been able to withdraw in good order. The only other thing that's happened is the British launched their fleet forward from Alexandria. But again, the Italians actually launched 2 squadrons of SM-81s to intercept the British fleet, and they managed to sink a light cruiser. So unescorted British fleet operating outside the air range of its potential fighter cover from Alexandria proved itself to be pretty vulnerable, despite putting up a strong anti-aircraft storm of fire. So that's it so far. That's the end of the 2nd op stage. The Italians are moving forward well. We'll now do the supply redistribution. The Libyan troops are really suffering already from their very inadequate provision of trucks to haul supplies up to their divisions. They're short on stores, short on ammunition, short on fuel, and that's why I've given them the flanking roles, because fundamentally that's less important. And we're pushing forward, as I say, with the 62nd, 63rd and 64th. They have more trucks allocated and are proving slightly more robust in terms of enabling their advance. They're also going the shorter route down the coast road, where the tracks are better, the fuel consumption is lower, and the distances are far shorter as well, which is helping them push forward. So let's see what happens as we complete op stage 2 and move into the final op stage of turn 1. Right, so here we are at the end of the first game turn and the end of ops turn 3, or the 3rd op stage, which brings that first game turn to conclusion. Not been a huge amount of combat in op stage 3. There were some fairly substantial amounts of air activity. Again, the Regia Aeronautica launched significant air raids against Buk, Mersa Matruh and Sidi Barrani, really going for the Allied supply dumps to try and cut off the supplies from the Allies moving forward with strong combat air patrols. And for the first time, the British launched substantial numbers of air raids from Alexandria. 3 squadrons of Blenheims hit Bardia and the other 2 army supply dumps in the vicinity of the frontier, and caused reasonably substantial losses, despite Italian fighters scrambling from the airfields around Bardia and the anti-aircraft batteries in the Bardia port themselves opening up. They did something to reduce the damage of those Blenheim air raids, but still a reasonable number of the bombers got through and caused damage to the Italians. Now, for the Allies, although they've lost a very substantial number of supplies, the ability to use the rail line and coastal shipping to bring supplies straight up to Mersa Matruh, as well as truck convoys on a very short distance on an improved road, means that there's really no danger of supplies running out, because the supply lines are really strong, and the Allies at the moment are really only fighting with an equivalent of a division, not even perhaps a division, a large brigade worth of troops on the frontier. And as you can see, they've now well fallen back from the pass, and indeed from Sidi Barrani, and are screening most of the way back to Mersa Matruh. Otherwise, none of the other Allied formations around Mersa Matruh, the 7th Armoured, 4th Indian, or indeed 2nd New Zealand, have moved or felt the need to move at all. For the Italians, it's looking, on the face of it, pretty good. We've got 2 regular divisions now who have captured the supply depot at Sidi Barrani. The Allies, however, did successfully demolish about 75% of the stores there, and the Italians themselves have done serious damage to the depot with their own air raids. So very little supply has been captured by the Italians at Sidi Barrani. But you can see we've got the 2 regular divisions, the 62nd and 63rd, now at Sidi Barrani, and the 64th and the 1st CCN are close by at Buk. The 1st CCN was pinned by barrages from the Allied fleet before it sailed back to Alexandria. Further inland, the 3 Italian militia divisions, the Libyan 1st, 2nd and third, the Maletti, continued to push inland to push the Allied screen away. But the Italians are really struggling now. These three ammunition depots, they had one at Sidi Azez, one under that Squadron Ground Support Unit 88th marker, and one in Bardia that looked absolutely stacked full of fuel, ammunition and stores, have now been very substantially depleted, pretty much down to about 10-15% of their starting values. Still a reasonable amount of supplies back up to Brook, and we do have some coastal naval units moving up, but our supply tracks, the first supply track has just reached Tobruk from the start of the game. First coaster has just reached Tobruk from the beginning of the game, 3 turns in. So you can just, the supply lines for the Italians are looking pretty threadbare. And that's part of the cost of moving 3 Libyan, 3 regular and 1 Black Shirt division forward. They've all consumed a lot of fuel and a lot of supplies, even if it's all predominantly leg infantry. There's quite a lot of trucks moving, quite a lot of artillery moving, and just the stores requirements and the ammunition they've expended in the brief confrontations they've had with the British has weighed heavily on the Italian logistics chain. So I absolutely understand why Graziani stopped at Sidi Barrani. I'm pretty much out of fuel and ammunition, and I can't see where the rest of it's going to come from. So we'll see what happens. It's only taken us 1 turn to get to Sidi Barrani, but I think getting on to Mersa Matruh, that might take most of the rest of the time of the 6 turns that are meant to be Graziani's offensive, and I can't see Alexandria looking anywhere close. Anyway, I've had quite a lot of fun playing the first turn. We'll see where we go from here.